Hello, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here. Hope you're all having a great day or a great evening, as it might now be. Today is January 16th, 2023. I've heard a little bit of buzz about this recent clinical guideline published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, so I'm going to look at that right now and give you my opinion of this. I haven't read it. I just saved it as a PDF document, so we're going to read this. I'll try to make this painless. I'll try to keep it quick, but sometimes commentary takes time, so we'll do the best we can. So this was just released exactly a week ago on January 9th, 2023. Again, this is from the official American Academy of Pediatrics. They say that they are dedicated to the health of all children. And this news release, so they published a news release, they published an executive summary, and of course then they published the more detailed guidelines. I suspect that most policy is probably going to come out of these, out of the press release, because most doctors aren't going to read the entire document, unless they're, a pediatrician, then maybe, but even then probably not. So most people, I think most of the impact of this document is going to come from this press release and from the executive summary. So right now we're going to start with the press release and see what it says, and take another look maybe in a different video on of the executive summary and see if it has anything that's different. But I suspect it'll be exactly the same. So I'm trying to highlight, but for some reason it's not highlighting. Oh, that's kind of weird. All right, so that's the game we're going to play. So I will have to use a different highlighting system. So it's fine. American Academy of Pediatrics. Its first comprehensive guideline on evaluating treating children and adolescents with obesity. Well, where the hell have they been for the last 20 years? Obesity has been skyrocketing. That's no surprise to anybody. And here we are in 2023, and they're just now issuing their first comprehensive guideline on evaluating treating children and adolescents with obesity. So they're already late. Let's see if I can put an X by that. Yeah, I'll just circle it or something, because that's ridiculous. Their first guideline? Where the hell have they been? Where's the leadership? Anyway, I'll move on. There's more evidence than ever that obesity treatment in children is safe and effective. I've read that now twice, because I did read it as I was printing out this PDF so I could make notes on it. That just occurs to me as such an odd initial sentence. There's more evidence. It's like they're kind of chomping at the bit to implement whatever their new treatment is, rather than talk about what's important for kids. It just seems weird to me. It seems like they're looking at this from the wrong perspective right out of the gate, but that's just my opinion. More than 14 million U.S. children and teens live with a common chronic disease that has been stigmatized for years and is associated with serious short and long-term health concerns when left untreated. Again, the emphasis that they're putting on this is just kind of, it's a weird angle. Stigmatized. Let's talk about what the problem is first. How about... I just think it just occurs to me as weird. It's a weird spin, twice now. When left untreated. Well, even that occurs to me as a weird spin, especially when we're talking about obesity. So obesity isn't necessarily something that needs treatment like other diseases when for most cases the cause is so obvious. Again, you'll see that they're emphasizing treatment, and wow, we've got treatment that's safe and effective. What a tragedy when this is left untreated. Everybody with any common sense and life experience has some idea of how this could have been prevented in the first place, including cardiovascular disease and diabetes. The disease is obesity, and it can be treated successfully with recognition that complex genetic, physiologic, socioeconomic, environmental factors are at play, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. So this is setting up, what they're trying to do is spin this as a complex disease. They want to turn this into something complex, unrelated to lifestyle, because if it were lifestyle, we would say eat less and exercise more, which would solve the vast majority of this problem. Reinitiate physical education. Like when I was growing up in the 70s in the United States in Texas, like we had physical education, we had playtime, and to my understanding, kids don't get that anymore, and at least in a lot of schools. And they sure as hell, none of us, for that matter, got anything related to what could have been available. If you look at the 1960s videos under John F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy initiated some pilot programs, I believe in California, for physical fitness. Where the hell is that conversation? Anyway, I'll see if we can keep making progress here. So my concern is they've got a really weird spin on this topic. I mean, if we're going to talk about obesity, let's not make it more complicated than it needs to be. Are some cases genetic? Yes, absolutely. If you look at certain genetic conditions, I'm recalling the clinical presentation, but I'm not recalling the name of it right now. And some of them are genetic, but I mean, come on, those are orphan diseases, physiologic, socioeconomic, environmental factors. Are they going to talk about, they would have to talk about ultra-processed foods, pesticides such as glyphosate, and high fructose corn syrup. We can't talk about obesity in the population or in children without talking about ultra-processed foods, and a subcategory of that would be the specific ingredient, high fructose corn syrup. So if we're going to talk about environment, then that is certainly one of the environmental players. The American Academy of Pediatrics has published its first comprehensive guidance in 15 years. Well, here they call it the first, and then here they call it the first in 15 years, which would make it not the first. That highlights more evidence than ever that obesity treatment is safe and effective. Here they go again. Because they want to sell whatever they've defined as the treatment, they want to sell that. Because the prevention of this, which would be exercise, getting kids off of junk food and getting them away from screens for 8 hours a day, they're not going to make any money off of that. So solving the problem doesn't give them power and money and control. So I'm suspicious. We're barely even one paragraph into this thing, and I already have my alarms going off that this is a weird spin, and it's probably going to be a profiteering disaster. So they published their first guidelines. So let me just say this. I'm doing this on my free time. I'm in my own house. I can say whatever I want. So what I'm going to say is, where the fuck have they been for the last 20 or 30 years while American kids are getting fat and out of shape and developing fatty liver and heart disease, at least the initiation of heart disease, in their young years? Where have they been? And where have they been for 15 years? So they said that this is the first time they've talked about this in the past 15 years. They should be talking about it every year until the problem is solved. Evidence-based recommendations on medical care, age 2 and older, included within a new clinical practice guideline for the evaluation and treatment of adolescents with obesity, published this year. Guideline accompanied by executive summary. I'll take a look at that later, unless this just blows me out of the water and just makes me sick of the topic. 2 reports, appraisal of clinical care practices for childhood obesity, Part 1, interventions, and Part 2, comorbidities. Most of us already know that. But let's just see what they say here. Weight is a sensitive topic for most of us, and children and teens are especially aware of the harsh and unfair stigma that comes by being affected by it. Well, that's just bad writing. Weight is not a sensitive topic. Weight is simply a number. What they should be talking about is overweight. And I realize I'm, being an editor when I say that, but I love doing editing, so they should say overweight. Unfair stigma? Well, we stigmatize it more by saying that it's a sensitive topic. What if we just accepted it for what it is? You, John or Jan or whatever your name is, whether you're an adult or a kid, you are overweight, you need to lose weight. If you don't lose weight, you're going to have these consequences. If you do lose weight, you'll receive these benefits. What if we just talk about it instead of coddling? I mean, coddling people around their weight perpetuates it as a stigma and as like this big emotional burden or whatever. Let's just be objective about it. You are carrying more weight than you should. If you lost that weight, you would have reduced risk for disease. Your joints wouldn't hurt. You'd have more energy. You wouldn't be depressed. You'd have less risk for infectious disease. So what's the problem with just talking about it like that? I think coddling people isn't helping them here. Because, in fact, coddling people around this topic makes the conversation more difficult, and the conversation is exactly where we have to start with this. Anyway, I'll keep going. Lead author of the guideline created by a multidisciplinary group. It's never a multidisciplinary group. In medicine, when they say multidisciplinary, they mean people within the same paradigm that maybe studied a slightly different branch off the same paradigm. Or, for example, it'll be a pediatric cardiologist, a pediatric endocrinologist, a pediatric psychiatrist. And they'll call that multidisciplinary, but they're all from the same discipline of pediatrics. They were all educated in the same, browbeating, abusive medical system that some of us went through. So when they say multidisciplinary, and maybe they'll have some PhDs that got their PhD from a medical center or a health science center, like our medical school. We had numerous PhD programs, and now they've got 2 medical schools in the same at the same center. But a lot of these PhD people, for example, have to go through classes in medical school in order to get their PhD. At least that's how it was at our school. So again, when they say multidisciplinary, they're not talking about how a naturopathic doctor or a chiropractor or, like an athletic trainer or somebody who's actually studied the metabolic and physiologic impacts of mercury and pesticides and vaccines. They're not talking about that multidisciplinary. They're talking about people within the same kind of school educational paradigm, and that's their version of multidisciplinary. In various fields, along with primary care providers and a family representative. So they had one family representative? What does that mean? That's just kind of weird. Research tells us we need to take a close look at families, where they live, their access to nutritious food, healthcare, and opportunities for physical activity. Well, I'll tell you about my access to nutritious food and physical activity. So I live, again, now in the United States. So maybe I'll do a comparison or maybe I won't. But let's just start with where I am right now, because we actually went for a long walk today. We woke up, we had coffee, I had a protein drink like I always do, and we left, not really knowing what we were going to do, but we walked for at least an hour. And we're in a major city. I'm not going to tell you which city, but we're in a major city within the United States. I don't know what it is. Top 20. I mean, United States is obviously huge, but we're in a urban area. And we walked for an hour. We walked for at least an hour before I saw the first grocery store where I could actually get like a vegetable, we passed bars, we passed a vape, at least one vape store, maybe 2. We passed, I think only 2 gas stations, but of course, they've got, processed garbage food there. So The United States is famous for having what are called food deserts, which is you can live in a big city, you can live in a big neighborhood, you can live, we're not out in the boons. I mean, we're next to a school, we're in a relatively dense neighborhood. And we had to walk 1 hour before we saw our first grocery store. So let's contrast that. I mean, it's a little bit unfair. So I'll have to contrast it a couple different ways. So when we lived in Barcelona, for example, I mean, we had fruit stands on either side of us within 3 minutes of walking out our front door. And that's, like I said, the comparison's not exactly fair because here, we don't live in the middle of downtown. When we lived in Barcelona, we did live in the middle of the center. So of course you would expect more things to be nearby. But if I were to go to the downtown area of this major metropolitan area where we live right now, you would not see food and fruit stands on every corner like you do in Barcelona. So, even as I say the comparison's not exactly fair, it is also fair because, like I said, if you went downtown to this city, or Houston, Texas, for example, if you want a specific named city, you go downtown Houston, Texas, you are not going to find fresh food and fresh fruit in the middle of downtown. You're not going to find it. I lived there for at least 35 years, so believe me, I know Houston, Texas, and I know downtown. And so, like I said, I'm trying to make a reasonable comparison here, but it's like the United States you have to drive to a grocery store in order to find food in most neighborhoods. Maybe New York City or LA or San Francisco might be different. And maybe, you can always get lucky. Like when I lived in Portland, I lived right next to a big grocery store. I could literally fall out of bed and fall into the front door of this grocery store. But not everybody has that advantage because here, the stores, first of all, the houses are spread out, so you don't have the density. But the stores here are huge or nothing. You either have, a reasonably big grocery store that may or may not have anything organic, but you don't have the small stores in every neighborhood. And that's what provides access to fresh fruit. So like I said, obviously we could walk, and we did walk for over an hour today before we found our first grocery store. But what about, my neighbor across the street who has had hip surgery and over several years? It's not like he just had it. But what is the chance of him being able to leave home and buy a cantaloupe? Zero. It's not going to happen. Impossible. So obviously we walked mostly in one direction. If we had gone in the other direction, it wouldn't have been any better. So anyway, I think I've made the point. Access to nutritious food, that's a big challenge for a lot of people. For the most part in the United States, you have to have a car and you have to drive that car in order to go get healthy food. Opportunities for physical activity. Well, where the hell were these people? American Academy of Pediatrics. Where the hell was the American Academy of Pediatrics when kids were being locked down for quarantine for COVID? I don't remember them defending children's rights to, activity. Now they're saying it's important. Well, why wasn't it important for the past 3 years? As well as other factors that are associated with health, quality of life, outcomes, and risks. What the hell does that even mean? Research tells us we need to take a close look at families, food, healthcare, physical activity, and as well as other factors. Why don't you say what the factors are? Associated with health, quality of life, outcomes, and risks. So far, this is just babble. Our kids need the medical support. Our kids need the medical support, understanding, and resources we can provide within a treatment plan that involves the whole family. Subcommittee on Obesity. Every time I read one of these guidelines, like from a major organization, and American Academy of Pediatrics is a major organization within medicine, every time I read one of these guidelines, I'm all the more happy that I didn't waste my life and waste my time studying pediatrics. I mean, I really wasn't inclined to do that anyway. Family medicine was more than enough for me as far as kids and these asinine guidelines. But unfortunately, that's what the practice of medicine is. It's grinding through 4 years of medical school, somewhere between 1 and 3 years of residency, depending on what you're going to specialize, or 4 years it could be, depending on, like if you're doing a surgical residency or a subspecialty like rheumatology, which I did have some interest in doing, and I'm glad I didn't do that either. Especially, the time that I spent in a rheumatology residency, not as a resident, but observing and participating as a medical student, I never saw those guys do anything that I didn't already know from looking at the Merck manual. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. The direct and man, I've got some horrible stories. I mean, I've seen their patients get hospitalized on stuff that, you know, any naturopathic student would have treated on day number 1. Stuff that they ignored until it became a crisis. But anyway, I'll try to focus in on this. Other factors, which they don't define, associated with health, quality of life outcomes, and risks. Understanding and resources we can provide. Our kids need the medical support, understanding, and resources we can provide within a treatment plan that involves the whole family. I think I already read that. It's still stupid. American Academy of Pediatrics guideline contains key action statements. I bet they're not going to be key action statements by my standards, but let's just see what they say, which represent evidence-based recommendations evaluating and treating children overweight and obesity related health concerns. Motivational interviewing. Most doctors have no idea what that means. Actually, we studied that when I was in naturopathic medical school, and I've since forgotten what it means for the most part, but I don't really care. To me, it sounds like it also would depend on the intention of the practitioner. Like, is it motivational interviewing or is it manipulative interviewing? Like, are you up to date on your vaccines? I mean, is that motivation or is that manipulation? Intensive health behavior and lifestyle treatment, pharmacotherapy, and metabolic and bariatric surgery. That's exactly where they're trying to go with this. So they're going to give, here's the deal, and here's how these guidelines work. They give vague lip service to stuff that they know doctors don't want to do, don't get paid for, and don't care about. That's going to get lip service, like lifestyle and health behavior. They have to include those words to not look like they're just running into, you know, polypharmacy and surgery, but they are running into polypharmacy and surgery. At least that's going to be my bias here. Let's see if they prove me wrong. The approach considers a child's health status, family system, community context, and resources. In other words, money. The guideline discusses increased risk for children with special healthcare needs as well as inequities that promote obesity in childhood. You mean like growing up in an urban environment that's a food desert where the only thing available is beer, pizza, cigarettes, alcohol, and junk food from a gas station? Are they going to talk about that? Probably not. Marketing of unhealthy food, low socioeconomic status, and household food insecurity. The role of structural racism has played in obesity prevalence is also discussed. Yeah, well, I could talk about that too. Overweight is defined as body mass index at or above the 85th percentile. Overweight is defined as a BMI at or above 85th percentile and below the 95th percentile for children and teens of the same age and sex. Obesity is defined as the 95th percentile. Well, I don't know how many of you pick up on the stupidity of that, but I'll tell you what the stupidity of that is. Overweight and obesity are defined as kind of a bell-shaped curve normalization of what's happening within the population, then as the population itself gets more obese, then obesity will forever become more obese, right? So, reasonably, they should or could have established some standards that were based on a physiologic state of health and hold to that, because this is what they've, by defining it as what is available, as what is available becomes more obese, then obesity itself would become more obese. The guideline does not discuss obesity prevention. The guideline does not discuss obesity prevention? They just played right into my hands. So that's exactly what I expected from these people. I expected that they wouldn't talk about prevention because they don't make any money off of prevention. These people, these pediatricians, this organization, they make their money off of drugs and surgery. Preventing the problem would be physical education in schools, so it becomes kind of mandatory as it was for us, or quasi-mandatory. You can always sit out if you want. And it would be healthy food in schools. That would be preventing this problem. They want to profit off of this problem. The guideline does not discuss obesity prevention. That tells you everything, almost, that you need to know. They want this thing to fester. They want this thing to be as bad as it can possibly be, because that's where they're going to make their money, which will be addressed in another policy statement. By then, no one's going to care. No one's going to pay attention, because they will have already sunk their teeth into this big wad of cash that's on the other end of these prescriptions and surgical procedures. So prescription drugs become an income source, of course, for doctors, because you have to go back and get your prescription refilled. You have to come back next month. We have to do lab tests. We need to see how it's working. If you keep people on the prescription treadmill, you've got to check it, recheck it, make sure it's right. You've got to come in for your refill, that kind of stuff. So it does generate some money, even though not a lot, relatively speaking. The big money in medicine, of course, are procedures. And those could be office procedures like a biopsy, or it could be a big procedure like a surgery. So either way, they're going to make some money off of it. And the other thing I don't like about pediatrics in particular is it's so vaccine centered. I mean, the vaccine sales merry-go-round or treadmill or rat race is a big profit center for pediatricians and family medicine doctors who do, pediatrics. So again, it's a way to keep people trapped into a system of dependency. And let's see if they do more of that before the end of this document. It'll be addressed in it's because it's not the priority. The priority is to cash in on this problem, not prevent the problem. American Academy of Pediatrics describes the role of a primary care physician or medical home in overseeing intensive long-term care strategies, ongoing medical monitoring, treatment of youth with obesity. Yeah, well, and this is a little bit cliche, and I'm sure many of you have heard it before, but for those of us who grew up in Generation X, the 1970s, we were all pretty skinny kids, because we ran and played football and we had recess, and at least for us, me and my friends, I mean, we were out there playing football and soccer and basketball and racing each other. I mean, we didn't even need anything. We just needed space, and we would race each other and create kind of our own games. I don't know if kids do that these days, but not from what I've seen. The little I've seen among the kids. We live next to two schools, so the kids are just kind of normal. But normal has become a little bit heavier than the normal was, back in the 60s and 70s. There is no evidence that watchful waiting or delayed treatment is appropriate for kids with obesity. Yeah, well, there's no point. I agree. Don't wait. Don't wait. do something about it. And author of the guideline and vice chair. The goal is to help patients make changes in lifestyle, behaviors, or environment in a way that is sustainable, involves family decision-making every step of the way. Key action statements. All right, talk to me about key action statements. Guide physicians on how to evaluate children and teens for obesity. So I may have to read the other document. Comprehensive obesity treatment may include nutrition support. Okay, so most medical doctors basically don't know anything about nutrition. So again, if they use these words, and I realize we're just looking at the press release here. Maybe I'll go into the executive summary. But so far I haven't been impressed. May include nutrition support. That doesn't say anything. In the same words that they just said nutrition support, they could have said Paleo-Mediterranean diet. At least that would be a little more clear. Nutrition support doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't guide anybody. You can't call it a guideline if it's not guiding. And nutrition support doesn't say anything. Physical activity treatment, behavioral therapy, pharmacotherapy, that's where they want it. That's where the push is. So, see, here's how this works. Let's say you're a busy, naive, medically trained pediatrician. You don't know anything about this. You don't know anything about nutrition. You know, I'll give it half an X for physical activity treatment. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to tell kids to be more active? Behavioral therapy. But pharmacotherapy, now we're getting interested because now we have a drug we can treat with. We can get return visits. Metabolic and bariatric surgery. That's weird. Just call it surgery. You just want to bypass these kids' intestines and make their stomach smaller. Just call it that. Don't try to justify it by calling it metabolic surgery. It's just surgery. Intensive health behavior and lifestyle treatment. While challenging to deliver, of course it's challenging to deliver because you only have, 7 minutes with a patient. Not universally available. Is the most effective known behavioral treatment for child obesity. Well, at least they gave it the credit it needs. But see how they say it's the best, but then they're also discouraging it at the same time. Challenging to deliver. Who wants challenging to deliver if you're a pediatrician trying to make $200,000 a year? Or more. You don't want challenges, you want something easy. Even if it is the most effective, it's challenging and not universally available. So you've already turned people off from wanting to do it. Most effective treatments include 26 or more hours. The most effective treatments include 26 or more hours of face-to-face family-based multi-component treatment. See, they're already exhausting people. Over a 3 to 12 month period. So what does any of that mean? So that would be what? 26 or more hours? So we'd have to do 2 hours a month? Talking face to face? No, we'd have to do more than that. We'd have to do, let's say 26 or more. So 2.5, let's just say 2.5 hours per month. No pediatrician is going to do that. 2.5 hours per month? I don't see that happening, at least not in the practices I've seen. Evidence-based treatment delivered by trained healthcare professionals with active parent or caregiver involvement. I mean, I don't think most kids have an active parent or caregiver involvement these days. Has no evidence of harm. That was a weird thing to say. Has no evidence of harm? Well, why would it have any evidence of harm? I mean, why is that even why are they emphasizing that? And can result in less disordered eating. So very subtly, they're admitting that disordered eating is a problem. And again, this is only a press release. We're almost at the end of it. So I can't criticize them too heavily for not being complete in a press release because that's going to be as incomplete as it could possibly be. But I mean, you all know my style. My style would have been action-oriented from paragraph number 2. I would have introduced the problem, defined it, and said, here's what we need to do about it. I'm already on the 3rd page of a very large size page here, and I still haven't seen anything I can sink my teeth into. Physicians should offer adolescents 12 years and older with obesity, weight loss, pharmacotherapy. Physicians should offer, so that's what I said. They want to jump into drugs. When the drugs don't work, they're going to jump into surgery because that's where the money is. So the only actionable thing, like everything's been vague, uninteresting, or slightly discouraged by the way that they're using language. But here they're saying physicians should offer adolescents drugs. So these things are challenging and not widely available. That's kind of like saying don't do it or don't pay attention. Because they've already provided the excuse. So the standard of care in medicine is what most doctors do. If this organization defines intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle treatment, which is, according to them, it's the best, if they define and describe it as challenging to deliver and not universally available, they've already provided their own physicians an out, which I could imagine would have an impact on what is the accountability and the true standard of care. Because they've already said you don't have to do this, is basically what they're saying. Look, intensive lifestyle, behavior, and lifestyle treatment, yeah, unfortunately, even though it's the best, it's challenging and not universally available. So any doctor who would fail to provide that treatment, even though it's the best, already has an out. They could say, look, it's too challenging. I don't have 2.5 hours to spend with these people. Challenging to deliver and not universally available. But hey, let's do drugs. Physicians should offer adolescents 12 years and older with obesity, weight loss, pharmacotherapy. And notice how specific they are in this one sentence, right? So everything else was vague, do it or not, or this, or you're not trained in it. You don't know what the hell nutrition support is anyway. But when they talk about drugs, boom, very clear. Physicians should, so this is standard of care language. Physicians should offer adolescents at 12 years of age they should offer them drugs according to the indications, risks, and benefits, just like with anything else, as an adjunct to the stuff that you're not going to do. Teens age 13 and older with severe obesity, 95th percentile, should be evaluated for metabolic and bariatric surgery. Just call it surgery. That's what it is. You're going to take out part of their intestine. You're going to make their stomach smaller so they get full easier. But of course, then later their stomach's going to stretch out and then they'll need surgery again. Or you're going to give them malabsorption by taking out or bypassing part of the small intestine. I mean, this is to me, this is disastrous. And maybe I'm biased because I don't like these people anyway. But fine. Their guidelines should be able to withstand critique. So let's say that I'm slightly biased and I don't like these people. I am slightly biased and I don't like these people. I acknowledge that. Their guidelines, but I don't like them for a reason. Their guidelines could impress me to the extent that I should be able to say, I don't like these people, I'm biased against them, and damn, that was a brilliant guideline. And I'm the one who needs to change. I'm the one who should have a better attitude towards pediatricians. That's what my experience should be after looking at this. Looking at my screen. After looking at these guidelines, I should be so impressed. I should be saying, damn, I wish I had become a pediatrician. The American Academy of Pediatrics encourages strong promotion of supportive... What? The American Academy of Pediatrics encourages strong promotion of supportive payment and public health policies that cover comprehensive obesity prevention, evaluation, and treatment. The guideline calls for policy changes within and beyond the health sector to improve health and well-being of children. Policy changes should address structural racism that drives alarming and persistent disparities in childhood obesity, according to the guidelines executive report. So I guess I'll have to, on another day, I'll have to read the executive report. The medical costs of obesity on children, families, or society as a whole are well documented and require urgent action. Where the hell have you been for the past 15 or 30 years? It didn't just now require urgent action. Where have they been? This is a complex issue. Multiple ways we can take steps to intervene now and help children and teens build the foundation of a long, healthy life. I don't think they give a damn about helping children build a foundation for a long, healthy life. I don't think they give a damn about that. American Academy of Pediatrics is an organization of 67,000 primary care pediatricians, subspecialists, surgery dedicated to health, safety, and well-being of infants, children, adolescents, and young adults. 2023 American Academy of Pediatrics. Wow. Okay, well, that didn't impress me as a good document or good guidelines. They discouraged what they know works, and they provided loopholes for what they know works. For example, let's go back and look at that. So again, here's the intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle treatment. It's the most effective, but it doesn't pay the rent. I mean, let's just be honest. It doesn't pay the big bucks, and it's kind of boring. You got to talk to these people for 2.5 hours every month. Most pediatricians are not going to do that. When I was rotating through pediatrics, our visits were minutes, not 2.5 hours per month. It was wham, bam, vaccination, ma'am, and looking at ears and trying to find reasons to give people drugs. I mean, that's how it occurred to me. And I'm not wrong on that. I mean, every kid who comes in doesn't need a vaccine or an antibiotic or an ADHD drug or whatever. But the bulk of our kids were put on drugs and, of course, vaccines. So here they describe it as the best, and then they say it's challenging and not universally available. Don't do it. Jump on those drugs, and when the drugs don't work, kick them out for surgery. That's where the money is. The money is on repeat visits, prescription refills, but mostly procedures and surgery. So they don't have any in-office procedures they could offer for this, but they can, punt to their local pediatric gastroenterologist and say, hey, sign them up for bypass or, stomach reduction surgery. So, for example, let's look at this from a slightly different perspective. This will just be more emphasis on what I think I've already said, and then I'll close this out. But, in this press release, they could have said that the urgency is to ensure that these kids are getting at least an hour every day of physical exercise. They could have said that in here. I mean, they didn't even say anything about exercise. And I realize that this is not a detailed protocol document. I realize that. But they could have at least said exercise for an hour a day. When when kids go to school, give them 30 minutes of recess in the morning. That's what we called it when I was a kid. It was called recess because you were kind of recessing from your schoolwork to go play and be a kid. We had recess in the morning. We had recess in the afternoon. And then we either did or didn't, depending on the grade and the school, we either did or didn't have physical education. But we actually did, now that I think about it. So when I was a kid, like I'm talking young kid, like single digits, I went to a public school called E.A. Jones Elementary School in Missouri City, Texas. And we had physical education, and we had to do windmills, putting our arms out until we felt like our arms were going to fall off. And so I guess I was 5 or 6 years old doing that. But that was our physical education class. And then later I went to a private Christian school. This was in Houston, Texas. I think it was on Hillcroft, Westbury Christian School. But we had physical education, and we also had just playtime and running around and whatever, soccer, basketball, all that kind of stuff. So why don't these guidelines talk about that? Minimum 1 hour a day of structured physical activity. Not telling kids to go be active on your own when you get home, because kids are going to plug into their screens and their games and their whatever they're doing. Structured, supervised physical activity in school. Where's that conversation in this document? So again, you can see it on the screen right now. You can see it on the screen. Comprehensive obesity treatment may include, these are all optional. Nutrition support is optional. Look at how this document is structured. May include nutrition. May include physical activity treatment, which they don't even define or put any guideline around. This, they say, is the best treatment, but it's too complicated and it's not universally available. Don't worry about it. That's basically what they're saying here. They're basically saying, don't think about this. Don't think about this. This can't hurt. And that's all they say. No evidence of harm. So, but it's not exciting. It's not really going to get you anywhere. Don't worry about it. It can't hurt. But here's what they should do. You should do pharmacotherapy and surgery. And they call it metabolic surgery. Just call it surgery. You're going to shrink the stomach. You're going to bypass the intestines. You're going to make these kids malnourished, and you're going to call that weight loss. Just admit it. Say what it is. So, okay, so this press release, based on the new guidelines, I think is negligent. It's professionally and criminally negligent, because they could have said all kids need and deserve 1 hour per day, preferably in 2 separate sessions, 30 minutes each, of structured, supervised, encouraged physical activity. They could have said that in this document. It would have cost them 1 sentence. And all they did is discourage this, gave lip service to this, no evidence of harm here. But here's what you should do. You should prescribe drugs, and you should refer for surgery. That's the practical reading of this document from the American Academy of Pediatrics in early 2023. So that's my review. Obviously, I'm not pleased with it. But let's go ahead and look at the executive summary. I'm not going to read their whole guidelines because I don't care enough, but I will read the executive summary. This document is a disaster. Let's see what the executive summary says. I guarantee you that most doctors are probably only going to read this. Some of them will read the executive summary. They may or may not go so far as to actually read the actual guidelines. Maybe some of them will, but a lot of them won't. So, I am being reasonable when I start with this document. We'll go take a look at the executive summary, and we'll see if that provides us any inspiration. But this document, as it is a travesty. I mean, this is horrible. It's professionally criminal but see, these people make their own standards. As long as you play, if you're a pediatrician or if you go to a pediatrician and that pediatrician is playing by these rules, they can never be found guilty of malpractice, because they'll say, look, I'm a board certified pediatrician. These are the guidelines of my professional organization, and I followed these guidelines perfectly. This stuff I didn't care about. They said this is too complicated, it's too challenging, and it's not available, and I don't want to spend 2.5 hours every month talking to these people anyway. So this was left vague. This was discouraged. All they did was say there's no evidence of harm, but they didn't endorse it. And then boom, we went straight to drugs and surgery. So that will be how these kids are managed, with drugs and surgery. That's a relatively detailed reading, or quasi nuanced reading. But what I wanted to say is that's the denotation and the connotation of what's being communicated here. Don't worry about this diet and lifestyle stuff. Jump in. You should. See, this is may. You see the difference here? Comprehensive obesity treatment may include these things, but this is what you should do. You should offer drugs, and you should send these kids out for surgery. You'll notice that the language isn't the same for exercise or diet. So here's my complaint, and this will be my final comment on this. They could have specified in this document 1 hour per day of structured, supervised physical activity with resources that these kids don't have at home. Most kids do not have a basketball court or a tennis court at home, but they could get those in school, whether it's a private school or a public school, right? So supervised, structured exercise in school provides kids with the variety that they'll never find at home or in their neighborhood. So that's huge. They could have said that, and they also could have said imperative to avoid high foods of high caloric density, such as ultra-processed foods and anything with high fructose corn syrup. They could have said that. They didn't say it. So I could have said both of those in one sentence. They could have said it in 2 sentences, and they didn't say it, but they did say these kids need drugs and surgery. So I think that's a travesty, and I've said it clearly, and they didn't impress me. So I started this conversation a little bit biased against these people and against their guidelines, and now I'm even more biased against them. I think these guidelines are criminal. In my next video, maybe tomorrow, I'll look at the executive summary of those guidelines. So this document is a disaster, and they're just profiteering off of the problem that they're failing to address, and which they have failed to address. So here we are, 2023. Kids have been getting more and more obese. Americans are getting more and more obese. We've been watching this happen for the past 25 years. And this is their first comprehensive guideline on helping these kids. And all it does is it's another funnel for pushing drugs and surgery on these kids, because that's where the money is. That's where the money is in medicine. Repeat visits and procedures. Thank you all for enduring my commentary. This is Dr. Alex Vasquez at inflammationmastery.com and healthythinking.substack.com. Thank you very much.